I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm thrilled to be talking about the wonderful series American Rust, Broken Justice. We are joined today by actor and executive producer Jeff Daniels, along with writer, co-showrunner, and executive producer Adam Rapp. And Adam, in starting with you and talking about the writing of season 2, I love how season 1 just really deliciously created these characters in a very observational way. And then the pacing of season 2 has really moved forward with a different momentum that kind of allows itself to exist from everything that you built in season 1. And so I was interested in how you really looked at the foundation of everything that you'd already built to really kind of adjust and shift the pacing and the way that you were telling the story this season.
Yeah, season 1, Dan Futterman and I were really hewing to the novel. We took some departures from that, and we enjoyed that, but we wanted the slower burn of our character development to be sort of at the forefront, and building the relationship between Dell Harris and Grace Poe, and what their relationship to Billy is, and the allegiances there, and all the kind of mysteries within their relationship was really important to kind of take our time with that. I know that we got some criticism for that. We loved doing that. We loved watching it get executed on set. We loved watching the actors execute that. Jeff and Maura and everyone else who was sort of around that relationship. I think in season 2, because the way things ratcheted up at the end of season 1, with the sort of pacing changing, and we started to feel the world spinning a little faster. Danny and I, when we got into the room and we had a lot of freedom away from the novel, we thought, well, let's kind of start there and see if we can maintain that tension and that pace, and without losing our character development, without losing the DNA we built, or we kind of wired between our characters who we love. And we just wanted to have fun with it. Honestly, we wanted to have, more without, I'm sounding a bit cynical here, but we wanted more bodies to be dropping to force us into more story.
I love that. And Jeff, in terms of talking about playing Dell, this show is very much created off the back of you having read the book and really having that vision for a television series. And I've heard you say previously that Dell was a character that you just knew and felt very familiar to you immediately in terms of playing him and who he was. And I was interested in how stepping into the second season of a show like this, and the fact that the storyline is doing a lot of different things for your character, has continued to really open him up while still having that relationship of familiarity with playing him.
Yeah, it was just a continuation. Season 1 was for me like a continuation of the book, but it was also establishing who all these people were, including Dell. And I think part of the reason people are responding so positively to season 2 is because of the time we took in season 1. You got to care about a half a dozen people in this show, and you got to root for them, and you got to want to know what's going to happen and lean in when stuff starts happening to all of them, not just Dell or not just Grace. So we took the time that one would take with a novel in season 1. And I was right. We got slapped around for that, but I don't care. I really don't care. I think that's part of the reason people are so into season 2, is because they care about these half dozen people that we set up in season 1. It's been fun for me to play Dell. I mean, I live in the Midwest and I know these guys. I probably am this guy in some ways. And there was a lot of NAR, no acting required. And I enjoyed it too, because I didn't have to perform. I wasn't going to the camera. I mean, I was just letting the camera come to me. I was letting it come to Dell. Dell isn't going to be any different off camera than he is on. And you don't always feel that with roles. When they rev up and they go action, you go into that performance of whoever you might be playing. But with Dell, it was just kind of let me know when the camera's turned on. And it just felt really natural. And the writing lent itself to that. It really did.
And with that sense of kind of how the performance is for you on the show as well, I've heard you kind of describing the way in which you really love to just be off book for a show like this, and to kind of give that first performance straight to the camera without necessarily needing to play through it before. And I was interested if that was something that kind of developed very early on from the first episode, or if it was just kind of a little bit of a necessity of some of the scheduling early on, or how that came to be for you.
It's all of that. I mean, I learned that on Newsroom where we had mountains of dialogue. I mean, Danny and Adam said to me before season one, he goes, think of all the lines you won't have to learn because Dell is a lot, quieter. But you have to. I mean, part of it is time, scheduling, yes. If it were a movie, they would take, 3 days to shoot what we're shooting in one. And a lot of that is wasted time, frankly. I worked with Clint Eastwood and you shoot one take. So you have to be off book. And that's where it started. And then with Newsroom, it was a necessity. And then it became about, well, why don't we just hit it on take one and take two? Well, why do we have to sit in a rehearsal room and rehearse it up? Why don't you get prepared and then show up and then let's make it happen in front of the camera for the first time? Sometimes you swing and miss or you go up or something, but I just find it a lot more urgent, a lot more immediate, a lot more present. And not everybody likes to work with that way, but I sure do. And I think it puts it in front of the camera instead of, actors in front of mirrors. You got to listen. If you haven't rehearsed this on take one, you're listening. And that's really the essence of film acting are people listening.
I love that, and Adam, in terms of talking a little bit about the structure of the stories through this season as well, there's a couple of different things at play. And I've heard you describe how, particularly through your work in the theater and playwriting, that, you love the way that you can play with two different narratives that kind of combust together. And so you've got the interpersonal storylines, and then you've got this larger dialogue and conversation with a large corporation that's coming in, and the whole thing to do with fracking and water quality in the area. And how did kind of having these two storylines that start very separate give you a really interesting way to bring together a lot of combustion and tension for all of your characters?
Yeah, I remember when I was learning playwriting and I kind of somewhat taught myself, and I was reading a lot of plays with stickers on them because I thought those were the best plays that won awards. And then I finally sat with a professor of playwriting, and I remember it was actually Romulus Linney, who was a great playwright, and he was teaching at the New School. And I was able to talk to him briefly, and he was like, yeah, if you can get two ideas colliding in the center, you might have yourself a pretty decent play, and two ideas that you didn't see coming. And in our case with this season, we have, what his mission is, which I don't know if I can spoil here or if I should, but his work outside of the Pittsburgh PD, what he's doing there. And then you have the fracking community coming in. Then you have someone who's sort of a fixer working with the fracking community. And then you have love stories. So we had like five, and that's just not even talking about Billy and his condition and what he's after. We had like 5 or 6 things going that felt pretty urgent and necessary. And I think once we figured out how to weave them together and get them all heading toward the same railroad tracks, if you will, ultimately it does when you get to episodes 8, 9, and 10, and you start to see those strands start to weave well. It was a tricky thing to pull off, but I think we try to do it as best we can. We try to breadcrumb it so that people could go back and go, oh, that happened here and this happened here, and now that's why this person is who he is and why she said this in episode 2. I think that was a lot of fun to figure out. I've never written like a whodunit kind of thing before. Danny and I took a lot of time, and we took a lot of time with the writers. We had terrific other writers in the room, some of whom had procedural experience, some of whom were just really good with character stuff. And we had to always keep the character stuff as our North Star. So I'll tell you, it was really fun to try to figure out the puzzle of, what happens with the fracking story and that central character in that story, how he affects everyone.
Yeah. And for both of you, in terms of talking about Dell as a character a little bit more, and Jeff, you were kind of touching on this before in terms of there being less lines of dialogue for a character. And, I was interested from your perspective, Adam, in terms of just the art of writing a character where you can take lines away and they still tell us so much about who Dell is. And, for you, Jeff, in terms of playing a character where very much he's not necessarily going to say the thing out loud, but through his actions, we really understand the deep-seated emotions and feelings that he has for people. people. You know, him saying, I don't like many people, but I like you, is actually like a really big proclamation of emotion for him. But it's the way that he shows up that really tells us so much. And so I was interested for both of you just in the dynamic of a character who's a little bit more minimal, but whose actions tell us so much.
Yeah, but he's thinking all the time.
Mhm.
And that's what I think the camera can do if you let it. Um, if you let it in, then it can see you thinking. And then what you choose to do or what he says, which may be minimalist, but there are things underneath it, the audience can either know what they are, or they can sense there's something else or something deeper. And that's, that's fun to play. It's a lot of fun to play. We would get episodes. I mean, I had a vague idea of what season 2 was, but really, I mean, I met Adam and Danny at a time when they kind of knew half of it. This was long before we started shooting, and then I never asked again. I enjoyed getting episode 6 in the middle of shooting episode 5 and finding out, just like the audience, what happens next. And it built. It was unpredictable. It wasn't where I thought it was going to go. And it kept surprising me in a great way. And as Adam says, the breadcrumbs just lead us to this boom thing at the end, which is, I know some people around here where I live are watching it, and they're glued. They're watching it. It builds and builds and builds, just like a novel. And then they get to the end of it at 7, 8, 9, and they have to watch all 3 at once. They cannot, they got to binge them till 2 in the morning, which is, as storytellers, that's what you want. You want to drive them to that end of the novel, and that's what I'm really happy with what Adam and Danny and company did on the writing end. I had no hand in it, I stay out of that. I really, part of the creative process, part of it is just getting good people and then turning them loose and not getting your hands on them as if you know what you're doing, because you really don't, especially actors. They don't really, we're all guessing. And just hire good people and then empower them, turn them loose. And then when you get the script, don't rewrite it. No, this is the script. These guys worked real hard on it. My job is to execute that. Takes a lot of pressure off and makes it fun for me.
I have to say, this is going to be a little bit of a love fest here, but we had an incredible ensemble, so much from Mark Menchaca to all the way, to our regular cast that came on in season 1. And that is such a relief when you have actors who are going to work on the script, who are going to come in prepared and who know who they are and who aren't going to ask for big changes. I've been on other shows where you have a lazy actor, or you have an egotistical actor, or you have someone who doesn't want to be there. And that's no way to make any kind of story. I will say this, Jeff sets an amazing example. You don't see a lot of number 1 on the call sheets who come in prepared, knows everybody else's line, sets an example, shows up on time, comes out of hair and makeup and is ready to go, and you get it in 2 or 3 takes. You don't see that very often. It's something I appreciate greatly. I know he comes from theater. Jeff comes from theater. I come from theater. Language is very important, even though Del Harris doesn't have a sea of words in the way that other characters that I've written might have, or that Danny's written might have. But like as he was saying before, like the stories on the face, if you can see the thought flickering, the camera's going to catch it. Somehow our crew and the alchemy of our crew, Radium Chang, who was our beautiful DP, Jim, uh, I'm blanking on,
Jim McKay.
Jim McKay. Oh, thank you. Too many names in my head. Jim McKay sets such an amazing tone on set. He's such a smart director. He knows what's in the frame, and he knows how to leave actors alone. He knows how to, like, allow the great actors to do their work. He doesn't get in their way. And I feel like that combination allowed for a lot of very intimate things to happen between the camera, Jeff, Mora, Alex Neustadter, uh, Steve Park's character, Rob Yang, who's such a brilliant actor. s- I think I think that's kind of the luck that we had, but I think part of it is like Jeff sets a tone at the top of the list and everybody follows suit. And then that allows the crew to know what's expected. That allows everyone to relax a little bit. We're going to start at a very high level place from take one, and we're going to get it in two or three, sometimes four because we'd have a technical difficulty. And then we can move on and get the day in. It keeps the crew energized. It keeps everybody on their toes in a good way. It keeps me on my toes. And it was just a very satisfying way to execute a show like this, which is not, it's not a comedy. It's a lot of intensity. It's a lot of drama. It's and a lot of some brutality, but I think if you don't have that spirit in the crew and in the cast and the leadership at the top, you're not going to get it. There's a scene in episode 1 in 201 where Jeff's character Dell is in his little apartment in Pittsburgh, and he's talking to Grace on the phone, and he turns into the window, and there's this beautiful red light coming in through the window, and you can just feel that where he is emotionally with with Grace, and how he doesn't want to completely acquiesce to her life at this point. He's still a little bit concerned about what his soul is going to do. And like, you can do that. You can only do so much of that with language. You can only do so much of that with a good line. Like, you have to have Jeff to do that. And then you have to have Radium Chang, who can frame that beautifully and find that reflection in the window, and you feel the whole thing. And that's the magic of when it works, and I think we got a lot of that this season. I'm very proud of it. But it doesn't happen unless you have it from the top.
Absolutely. And Jeff, kind of off the back of Adam just mentioning the intensity around this season in particular, I was interested in kind of how you approached answering the question of how does Dell respond to the fact that there's just even more of a constriction and more of a building tension around him? It's so many different aspects, even down to just Chief Steve Park kind of closing in on him and starting to figure out more of the details of what really happened. And so how did you set about figuring out how Dell was going to respond to the increasing tension?
Yeah, it was a fun character to play because I keep thinking of him as a good man having to do bad things or making bad choices, trying to atone for some of the bad things. But at the core of him is a good guy, and he's trying to fix it somehow. And he may have to do some things that aren't legal to do that, but the intention is a good one. And he's hanging on that till the end of season 2, and even is going to throw himself on the sword due to some plot circumstances for the right reasons, for good reasons. Even though it just gets worse and worse and worse for him, he hangs on to that, and that's what kind of pulls you through. As I was going through season 10 with I have an injury, let's say, and yeah, and yet you're still driving on despite this pain that you're in. But that was the goodness in Dell, just trying to just get out the other end of this madness.
I love that. And Adam, for you, kind of off the back of what Jeff's talking about with, being able to play with the morality of a character, I feel like this show has a lot of rich duality in terms of, moments where the characters are making the right choices, moments where they're making the wrong choices. And that's narratively much more interesting. But it sounds like when you write, you want to be very conscious of never going too far and just staying on one side of the lane for any individual character. And so how do you make sure that you're doing that for every character, and also that you're not necessarily playing them all in the same spaces at the same time?
Yeah, I think the moral ambiguities and the is a real fun thing to write. I mean, when you watch generally good people doing bad things or making mistakes, that's where the conflicts and the drama is. I think we all are culpable of making poor choices in our lives. We're all also culpable, or we enjoy when we reach apotheosis and we do incredible things for people. Like, we're all angels and devils. And I think that's something that Danny and I try to keep in our compass as we move forward in the narrative. we were also thinking about atonement a lot. We were thinking about I always liken it to like the Raskolnikov theory of how he approaches the world and crime, crime and punishment, which is can good deeds offset bad ones? Like, is there a ledger on our soul? Like, can we, if I murder the pawnbroker, can I help this poor woman out and change her life? And will that put me in greater standing if there is a deity above us? I think there's something about our show and these characters that really come out of the novel, honestly, that have these sides to them that are good and bad, that are capable of great things and horrible things. And I think there's something incredibly pleasurable about writing that and dramatizing that. And Danny and I tried to keep that for every character as we went through, like so that no one was completely virtuous and no one was completely awful. I mean, Steve Park thinks he has the answers, and he very well might have all the answers to lead to truth. But in his dogged attempt at finding the truth, hubris takes hold, and his pride takes hold at the cost of everything else in his life. And then there are consequences to that too. So we just wanted to, just when you think someone's going to come out ahead, we wanted to make sure that there was another door that was going to open or close.
Yeah. And Jeff, with the relationship that Dell has with Maura Tierney's character, Grace, in this season, it feels like at the beginning, there's still a little bit of a push and pull, as Dell's kind of grappling with his own feelings and what is the potential guilt, what's the penance that he wants to exhibit. Was I fully making all of these choices by myself, or was I influenced? And so what was the push and pull that you saw a little bit internally in Dell, particularly in those early episodes?
It's complicated, and she's got some baggage. Dell has some baggage, and they're two kind of damaged people trying to, are the two of us gonna, is that a better life for both of us if the two of us are there? And there are trust issues with her that Dell has coming into season 2 based on some things in season 1. They're not always truthful with each other. They hold things back. It's complicated, and complicated is fun to play.
Definitely, and to that point as well, Adam, in terms of writing Grace as a character this season, I love the way that you kind of get to play around with the idea of what if she does start to get some of the things that she's wanted, but then she has to question what does that ask of herself, and also particularly for a character that doesn't necessarily feel worthy of receiving things in the world because she often hasn't been given things in the past. And so how did that open a lot of new layers with her as a character for you?
Well, Dan and I talked about early on, he was really, really excited about getting her some money, and seeing what this woman would do with money. Would it open up a good side of her? Would it corrupt her in some way? Is she gonna, with the land will, with the energy company, is she gonna blow the whistle for things that aren't going well, or is she gonna actually acquiesce and sort of keep secrets? What was this gonna do, for her community, but also what is this gonna do in her relationship with her son, with her relationship with Dell? That was a lot of fun. And I have to give Danny a lot of credit for that, because he was like, we gotta give her some cash. And we got to see what that does to a woman who's never experienced that before. I mean, we're all, I feel like, the more success I've had in my career, thank God I can afford to live in New York and have some things, but as I encountered that part of my life, I started to question myself, like, what am I doing? Who am I all of a sudden? And I think, a little bit of success can do that to you, especially when you struggle for most of your life, as Grace has. So I think it opened up some cool things, and some, she gets questioned by her friends, one of whom she's set up a land will contract with, and she comes and knocks on her door with a few other people from the community, and they're like, what's going on here? Like, what did you help us sign up for? Because, people are getting sick and the land's getting bad. And, we tried to be really good about both sides of the argument. I mean, I think fracking is, we didn't want to take a political position. There are benefits, and there are also things that don't quite work about it in certain communities. And I think it was fun to put Grace in the middle of that conversation.
Definitely. And Jeff, for you, in terms of the scenes that you share with Mara, I love the way that you describe working with her, in that she's someone who's just incredibly present when she's listening. It's very much that she's listening as her character. She's not someone who's kind of thinking about the next line or the performance that she just gave for the previous moment. And so what does that then give you in terms of your performance and what you're able to bring to the table off the back of that?
Well, it's how we work. It's how I work. So that's where we kind of met, was every day we met in front of the camera and make, oh, this is what we think it is. Start shooting. And she went with it. And it's not for everybody, but it's exciting when it works, because it's happening right. It's right there. It's between the two of you versus doing bad film acting, camera acting, where you start to lean in towards the camera and you do all the little film mechanical tricks that are in everybody's book. And you kind of have to drop all that, because it's like we haven't done this very much at all by the time they're moving the camera around. And it's still alive and it's still new and you still have to listen. And yeah, that's all you can ask. And she did that. She was present.
And Adam, then in terms of opening up, not just having Grace present in Dell's life, but the moment where she meets Angela, played wonderfully by Luna Velez, for the first time, how did you set about finding when was the right moment narratively to introduce those two characters to each other with Dell there in the room?
Well, Luna's such an amazing actress, and oddly, we didn't know that the chemistry between her and Jeff was going to be so good. I mean, we could anticipate that because, she's so good and Jeff's so good. So we didn't realize it was going to, like, I'm not going to say that it feels romantic in a way that men and women fall in love, but it feels romantic in the way that men and women pursue friendship, and the way that men and women pursue the truth of something. If they're, they have an amazing chemistry. So I think what we realized, it took a while for us to put, Luna and Mora in the same frame, and it doesn't happen until, Dell winds up in the hospital. I'm not going to spoil anything too badly here, but they wind up, looking at the same man who they both care about for different reasons. But I have to be honest, I liked playing with the idea that the audience might anticipate a romance, or some kind of romance, or some kind of intimacy that feels romantic between Dell and Angela. I think that's good tension, and I think it kept Maura on her toes, and you could feel it when we were shooting it. Like, those two women, both have a tremendous amount of love for this man. One is more of a workaday love, and one is more of a romantic love. But I think there was an interesting tension that built. And I think, all so much praise goes to Luna for, like, what she brought to a company of actors in a season 2 arc that was sort of introduced. All her scenes are with Dell. All her scenes are, with our heavy hitter. So it was a pleasure to watch it. And I can't wait to see what, if we get a season 3, I can't wait to see where that goes.
Definitely. And it's a really, really wonderful second season of the show. So congratulations on everything. And thank you so much for talking about the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.